שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יקקה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Shabbat Shalom. Let me just get rid of this and show this. Shalom. This is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, coming to you today from the city of Katzrin in the Golan Heights. If you would like to join a Karaite community that we will build, then this is where we're going to do it. I'm making it official announcement because this is where I am, and there are so many advantages to being in this place, not the least of which is that we have the privilege to be able to call out to the name of Yahweh. We will be one of the few, if only, people in the entire north of the country, or at least in this entire area, calling out to Yahweh by name, to help bring his protection and his salvation to the north of the country, which is in great jeopardy now, although even temporarily it seems the situation has subsided a bit. We haven't heard any sirens here in Katzrin, where I live in the Golan Heights, in, I would say, about a week now, but we're definitely not out of hot water yet. So I'm making it official. We are establishing our first Karaite community here. There are so many advantages. The north of the country is beautiful. Katzrin is in the Golan Heights. The Golan Heights is, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of the land of Israel, although all of it is quite beautiful. And there's something very special about the Golan Heights. In addition, it is amazingly, this is something that I didn't know when I first came to check out living in Katzrin, but it is amazingly located. Contrary to being isolated, as some people think it is, it's actually very near a whole bunch of amazing things. Yes, it would be preferable to have a car. I would say it's almost essential to have a car. You know, if you can't afford a good car, buy an old junker. But it is near so many different things, including the Lake Kinneret, the Sea of Galilee, the city of Tiberias, the city of Rosh Pinah, one of the earliest settlements in the land of Israel. Well, when people started resettling the land in the mid to late 1800s. It's near Tzfat. It's near. Did I mention? I think I already said Tiberias, Tzfat, Rosh Pinah, and just a lot of little settlements and cities and beautiful areas. So it is definitely, I never feel isolated up here. I actually feel like I'm very centrally located because I'm in very good location with respect to these other cities. And I've been all over the place since I've moved here in mid-August. I've been all over the place up here in the north and or up here in the Golan Heights and the Upper Galilee area. There's some beautiful sites along the Sea of Galilee, along Lake Kinneret. I can't speak highly enough about it. It's really just a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place. Katsarin is a wonderful city for families. It's very, very, very family friendly. If you have young children or older children, it's extremely family friendly. There are some good schools here. The streets are very walkable. In fact, on one of the main streets, they just installed speed bumps and very clear crosswalks the other day. So it's just a great place. It really is. And yes, we have the extra added privilege, which of course comes with a certain amount of risk and danger of being here to help protect the northern border. But I think as Karaites, as Choserim b'Teshuvah, Choserim b'Tanach, that is our responsibility, because how many people up here are calling out to Yahweh by name and calling out for protection and salvation for the northern border here in Israel. And we have a unique opportunity which allows us to do this. And yes, it does come with certain risks, but you know what? Life is full of risks, and it's not like at this moment in time, it's not like there's any great danger. Yes, it could erupt again, but life here is, for the most part, really quiet. People are friendly up here. People in Katsarin are very friendly. You almost feel like you're not in Israel to a certain degree, if that makes any sense. If guys have ever been in Israel and had to deal with Israelis, they're not always the easiest people to deal with. And in Katsarin, they're much more laid back and friendly. You almost feel like you're in a different country. So yes, I am making it official. We are starting our first live in-person World Alliance of Qara'im community here in Katsarin. Come one, come all, whether you live in Israel already or whether you're thinking of making Aliyah, then do so and come to Katsarin, and let's start putting together a vibrant Karaite community here in the Golan Heights. And if it grows enough, we can expand out to other places. So that's that. I hope you guys can all hear me. Can we get a quick sound check? Nathaniel, can you tell me, can you hear me okay? Can somebody tell me if they can hear me okay? And Shabbat Shalom, Nathaniel. Just let me know in the comments. Put a Y if you can hear me okay. Just so I can get a decent sound check here. All right, I'm going to hope so. It looks like everything is good here. Somebody, if you can, just pop a Y in the comment, just so I can know that the sound is working okay. But it seems from this side that it is, so if I don't see anything, I'll assume it is. Hopefully someone would have said something if not. For those of you who wished me well regarding my cold, which seemed to be a recurrence of maybe I had a really bad cold in January and February of this year when I was still living back in Portugal. And I think it was COVID. I don't know. I never got tested. I never took any of the vaccines, any stuff like that. But it was definitely different from colds I've had in the past. And so I might have had a resurgence of it over the past couple of weeks. I definitely was experiencing some cold symptoms, and a bunch of people wished me well. So thank you. Everything is pretty much 100% back to normal. It might be a very, very slight lingering cough, but everything seems pretty much back to normal at this point. Okay, so we're going to dig in. I posted a video yesterday. Let me see if I can actually share it. So I've been doing a lot of, one second here. I've been doing a lot of shorts. And no, I don't mean short pants. Short format videos on the World Alliance of Qara'im, YouTube channel. And so yesterday I posted one. Let me see if I can get it here. I posted one about the importance of using the name of Yahweh in prayer, supplication, which also I guess is a kind of prayer. When you take oaths, which you probably shouldn't do, but when you do, wait a second here, I've got to switch account. And even in day-to-day conversation, when speaking about God, it's completely acceptable and even recommended. Shabbat Shalom. Okay, from driving. Shabbat Shalom, Mariana, Miknana Banana. So it's completely acceptable and even recommended to use the name Yahweh. In fact, when one is speaking about God, one should always use the name Yahweh unless you're speaking about him in a sentence, like he is God or something like that, right? But if you're speaking about him by name, just as let's say we're speaking about our friend Bob, whoever that is, then if I'm talking about Bob, which I probably shouldn't be behind his back, but if I am for whatever reason, then I'm going to say, oh, Bob said this and Bob did that and Bob did that. And oh, I'm going to go visit Bob later. So that's the way we should be using the name Yahweh. There shouldn't be any sense of shame in using it or any sense of doing something wrong by using it. We shouldn't feel that we have to be in a certain state of purity or a certain state of mind to use the name. Obviously, we should treat it with respect. It is an incredible name, Yud Hey Wow Hey. It's made up all of basically semi-vowels, you could say. They're kind of like half consonants, half vowels. And we should and must use it on a day-to-day basis when we call out to Yahweh in prayer, when we speak about Yahweh, etc. So I posted a video yesterday. Let me see. Why is it? Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Channel. Let's see if I can bring this video up. And I'll even share it on the screen. Let's see if we can get it going here. Just give me one. Stop. What the heck is going on here? 1 second, please. Okay, I gotta go like this. I gotta bring it back here. I don't know. It has subtitles. Doesn't matter. Okay, so let me share the screen for a second. See if you can see it there. I don't know how to make it any larger than that. I think for this format you can't. So here we go. Shalom, this is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, broadcasting to you today from the beautiful northern city of Rosh Pinah. In a previous video, we spoke about the importance of using the name Yahweh in prayer, in supplication, in taking oaths, even in conversations with other people about Yahweh. In fact, it could be said that if one does not use the name Yahweh, then one is not fulfilling the Torah, and one is, in a certain sense, calling out to foreign gods with foreign names such as Adonai, Elohim, Hashem, etc. The importance of using the name Yahweh cannot be overstated, and I will illustrate with 2 verses from the Tanakh, Joel chapter 32, verse 2. V'haya kol asher yikra b'shem Yahweh yimalet. And so it shall be that all those who call out to the name of Yahweh shall escape. Psalm 124:8 is Reini b'shem Yahweh oseh shemayim va'aretz. My help is in the name of Yahweh, the maker of heaven and Shalom. This is Hakham. Okay, so that's that video, and it brings 2 verses: Joel chapter 2 verse 32, and Psalm 124 verse 8. We could take a look at those verses, perhaps, but maybe I'll bring some other verses because you can find. I haven't done a count, but probably hundreds of times in the Tanakh that the Torah emphasizes the importance of calling out to Yahweh. Now we know that the rabbis and other communities, such as, for instance, even the Samaritans, they have a ban on the name, so they won't say the name Yahweh. They'll say Shemeh, which means the name, kind of like what the rabbis do when they say Hashem. The ban on the name has a long and very rich or poor history. We see it already in the Dead Sea Scrolls, where we see the word Adonai substituted in certain places. I believe in the Isaiah scroll, if I'm not mistaken, for the word Yahweh. We certainly see it in the Masoretic texts, where you have the Kri and the Ketiv. I won't get into all the details of what that means, but essentially what it means is that the Masoretes in their texts, which they wrote in the 8th, 9th, 10th century approximately, they point out names that should not, or words that should not be said when reading the Torah or when reading the Tanakh. Shabbat Shalom, Tzuriel. And they do this with a system called Karaites, where the consonants of the word are always written in the text of the Torah, so that the consonants never ever change in the text. But if there is a word that should be said differently, or if there's a word that should not be said and should be substituted with another word, then they have a system called the Karaites, where they essentially put a little circle, which points to a Masoretic note, and then they put the consonants of that word out in the margins, but they leave the vowels of the substituted word in the text. So that way you can, when you're reading through, you won't have to look off to the side to see the vowelization. I won't go into a whole long thing about this, but essentially that's what we see in the case of Yahweh. The letters of Yahweh are always written in the main text of the Masoretic text, Yud Hey, Waw Hey. But what we see is the vowelization that is appropriate for Adonai and not for Yahweh. And this is done with something called the Karaites Perpetuum. So we won't get into all the details right now. The basic bottom line is that it points out that the Masoretic texts show that there was a ban on the name of saying the name of Yahweh when the Masoretes wrote, and it's speculated or it's believed that they were Karaites. So it's possible that even within Karaite circles there was a ban on the name, but certainly within rabbinical circles by then and for many hundreds of years there had already been a ban on saying the name. The basic bottom line is that for thousands of years, most Jews have felt that it's incorrect to say the name Yahweh, and so they always substitute it with Adonai or Hashem or Elohim. And this is a big no-no. This is really bad news, because if we are not calling out, we were given the name of Yahweh for a reason, as we saw in Exodus chapter 3, where the name Yahweh, was the reasoning behind the name or the explanation of the name, and then the name Yahweh is revealed to Moses out in the desert by the burning bush. And we're to use this name. This is the name that we're to call out to, just as foreign nations call out to their gods by name. If you're a Christian, you call out to your God by name. You call out to Jesus or Yeshua by name. You don't substitute the word Jesus for Hashem or something like that, right? If you are a Hindu, you call out to your false gods by name. If you're an Ammonite or a Moabite, you call out to your false gods, whether the Baalim or Chemosh or Dagon, that was for the Philistines. You're going to call out to your foreign gods by name. So all of these other nations are calling out to their false and foreign gods by name. They don't substitute Shemeh or Hashem or Elohim or El or anything like that. They call out to their foreign gods by name. So isn't it ridiculous? Isn't it insane that we as Israelites have had drilled into our head, as Jews that we've had drilled into our head for thousands of years, that we cannot call out to the true God by name because the name is so holy that we can't even say it? No, we on the contrary, we must say it. We have to say it. We have to call out to Yahweh. We have to invoke his name, because that's the only way that we can get his attention. That's the only way that we can get his mercy and his salvation, and in a sense to bring him down to this earth by calling his name, by invoking his name. We're bringing him down. I don't mean physically, of course. We're bringing down his glory, the Kavod Yahweh, which we've spoken about a bunch of times in previous talks. We're bringing that down into this world. Just like if you're walking down the street and you see your friend, I don't know, I'll make up a name, Eric, and you see him walking down the street, and I don't know, you're hanging out in the coffee shop. I believe so. Sorry, I don't speak for Yahweh, but yes, I think the fact that we're not calling out to his name is it's an insult to him. It's actually an insult. And insanely, the rabbis say that it's an insult to use his actual name, that it's impossible. It's such an ineffable, it's such a perfect name, it's such a holy name that we cannot even invoke it. Baloney. We have to invoke it. So what was I saying? Yeah, if your friend, Eric or Bob is walking down the street and you're in the coffee shop and you want Bob to come into the coffee shop, what are you going to do? You're going to call him out by name. You're going to say, "Hey, Bob, hey, come over here. It's I don't know, it's Michael. That's my English name. Come over here. It's Michael. Why don't you come down and sit and have a cup of coffee with me?" If he's walking down the street and you call out "yo" or "hey you" or something like that, then maybe you'll get his attention, but you're certainly not going to get maybe 100 people will turn around, or maybe 50 people will turn around. If you call out, "Hey, person," you're not going to get Bob's attention. If you want to get someone's attention, if you want to invite them to come towards you, then you have to use their name. And it's the same with the name of Yahweh. It's when people call bad good and good bad. Absolutely. It's insanity. This is the insanity of the rebelliousness of the nation of Israel, that we have turned something that is an actual requirement throughout the Tanakh. Hundreds of times we are told to call out to the name of Yahweh, and we've turned that requirement into a ban, into an isur, into a forbidden fruit, that we cannot call out to the name of Yahweh. So why don't we look at a couple of those verses, and then I will tell you a couple of interesting things about it. So let's look at Joel chapter 32 verse 2 very quickly. Let me bring it up here and then I'll share it on the screen. Joel, where did you go? Joel 32. I'm sorry, not 32. There's not 32 chapters in Joel. There are 4 chapters and 3 chapters in Joel. Joel chapter 2 verse 32. So let me share the screen. So Joel chapter 2 is thank you, sorry. Joel chapter 2 is a really cool chapter. It speaks about the great and terrible day of the Lord. So read it very quickly in English. "Blow the trumpet in Sion, in Zion, sound the alarm on my holy hill. Let all who live in the land tremble for the day of Yahweh." See that even in the translation, it doesn't say the day of Yahweh. It's not what it says in Hebrew. It says Yahweh in Hebrew there. Why do they translate it as Lord? Because it comes from the ban of the rabbis, or the rabbis and other communities, but made eternal in Judaism by the rabbis. They substitute the word Yahweh usually with Adonai. Adonai means my Lord. And it's probably connected to the Latin word. It's probably connected to the Latin word like don or dominant, like Don Corleone. I can't remember the exact Latin word now, but Adonai, Adon is probably connected to don. I know, for instance, in Portuguese, if you wanted to speak about the lady of the house, the person who runs the house, you say Dona Casa. So the lady Dona and the man is Don, like again, like Don. I'm not thinking of the other cognates now at this moment. It doesn't matter. At any rate, so because the rabbis, this should say Yahweh here, where I've highlighted it in. Instead, it says Lord, because the rabbis substituted Yahweh with the word Adonai. The word Adonai means Lord or master. And so when it's translated into the English, they translate that ban on the name, makes its way into the English translations. And this is almost all English translations will write the word Lord here. And you see they put it in capital letters. Why? Because they're trying to say that it's a proper name. They're trying to point out that this is a proper name, but Lord is not a proper name. Adonai, the Hebrew equivalent of Lord, is not a proper name. Elohim, which just means God, is not a proper name. Hashem, which means the name, is certainly not a proper name. Right? Imagine if Bob is walking down the street and you want to call him into the coffee shop and you call out, "Hey, the name. Would you like to have a cup of coffee with me?" The guy's just going to walk right on by. You're not going to get his attention. You're certainly not going to get his favor. You'll probably piss him off. You'll probably get him angry. You're like, "Hey, what are you doing? What are you calling me the name? What is something wrong with you?" But that's what we do with Yahweh day in and day out. But at any rate, we want to go to Joel 2:32. I'll read it in the English and then maybe we'll look at the Hebrew for a second. Okay. And it'll illustrate the point if we look at it in English. And everyone, so this is speaking about the great and terrible day of the Lord. I'll just read from here in English. And afterward, I will pour out my spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your old men will dream dreams. Your young men will see visions. Even on my servants, both men and women, I will pour out my spirit in those days. So everyone's going to be kind of a prophet. I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and billows of smoke. The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood. That's where, from here, this verse, Joel 2:31, is where we get the idea of the blood moon, which some people love to talk about before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord, right? So this blood moon, this is just a side point. This comes from here, Joel 2:31. Where they say, if it's a blood moon, it means that it portends the end of days. So everyone's out there looking for these blood moons. At any rate, and everyone who calls on the name of, look at what it says here, the Lord. That's not what it says in Hebrew. We'll see it in Hebrew in a second. It should say on the name of Yahweh, or the name Yahweh will be saved. For on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, there will be deliverance. As the Lord has said, even among the survivors who the Lord calls. So we see here the Lord appears 3 times, but if we look at the Hebrew, we're going to see 3 times the name, not the word, the name Yahweh. So let's take a look at in the Hebrew, Joel chapter 2, verse 32. Okay, so here it says in the Hebrew, Wahaya, kol asher yikra b'shem Yahweh. So it shall be that everyone who calls out in the name or to the name of Yahweh, doesn't say Lord, it says Yahweh, Yimalet, will escape, will survive. Ki bahar Sion u'Yerushalayim ti'eh pleta. So, because on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, there will be those who escape. Asher Amar Yahweh, but Saridim Asher Yahweh Koreh. As Yahweh said, and this is a quote from Yahweh, and the survivors, the ones who survive, who Yahweh will call, will point out, will call out. Okay, so we see here the word Yahweh 3 times. We don't see the word Lord anywhere. If this is the Masoretic text, but we don't see an actual, well, we do. We see the vowelization here. Okay, so the vowelization we see in this case, let's look at this last one. We'll look at the first instance here, and this is going to get kind of technical, but I won't get into it right now. So we see 2 dots under the Yud. That's a Shva. And we see what's called, we see the little T thing under the second letter, under the Hey, that's called the Kamatz. And then, I'm sorry, that's under the Vav actually, not under the Hey, it just looks like it's under the Hey here. And then we don't see any other vowelization. Now these are the vowels, not of Yahweh, but of Adonai. Now there is a cholam missing. It's called the missing cholam. I won't get into all the details. There's another vowel missing, but the reason that it's missing is either because it was not necessary, because it was clear whenever Yud Hey Waw Hey is written, that it is supposed to be pronounced, or was supposed to be pronounced Adonai, or because people didn't want, or because the Masoretes did not want people, they were reading the name, to mistakenly say the incorrect name, which is Yehovah, by doing all the vowelizations. So they leave the O sound over the H out. We're getting too technical now. It doesn't matter. The point is that we see here in the text, in the actual consonants, in the body of the Masoretic texts, we don't see the word Lord, we don't see the word Adonai, we don't see the word Elohim, we see the word Yud He Waw He, we see the word Yahweh. Why it's pronounced Yahweh and not Yehovah or Yehovah. This I'll talk about in future videos, and I've pointed to it's a 15-part series which goes into this in great detail. Unfortunately, it's done by a Messianic, but the guy rarely speaks about his Messianism. Yes, he does here and there, and you have to put up with it a little bit. But basically, it's very long and very detailed, but it goes into great detail in about 25 hours worth of video, which explains in great detail why the pronunciation should be Yahweh and not Yehovah or Yehovah. Okay, we won't go down that route right now because it's not relevant. Let's look now at Psalm 124, verse 8. That was the other verse that I mentioned in the video. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Psalms. Come here, Psalms. Where'd you go? Samuel. There it is. Psalms 124. 8. And here it says, second. It says, Ezreni b'shem Yahweh oseh shamayim wa'aretz. My help, my aid, my assistance is in the name Yahweh, the maker of heavens and earth. Okay? So my help is in the name Yahweh, is in the name of Yahweh. Okay? That is the importance of calling out to the name. Now, I'll say a couple of interesting things. First of all, let me see if I can find it now. So I was in rabbinical shul, rabbinical Beit Knesset here in Katsarin this morning. Since we don't have an active Karaite community here, and I do like going to communal prayers. I do, not always, but I do from time to time. I would say mostly on Shabbat. I do go to the rabbinical prayer service. I have a lot of problems with that rabbinical prayer service, but I go to it anyway. It's a way to be part of a community, and it's a way to interact with other people. It's a way to also get some of my viewpoints across slowly but surely. And so because today is what's called Cholamod, Shabbat Cholamod Sukkot, it's the Shabbat that is within the holiday of Sukkot. The rabbinical holiday of Sukkot started on Wednesday night. The biblical holiday of Sukkot started last night, Friday. So we're actually right now on the first day of Sukkot. So it's both Shabbat and the first day of Sukkot. But because it is a Shabbat that takes place within Sukkot, so the rabbinical service of the Rabbinites, they say something called Hallel. Let me see if I can find it. So Hallel could be translated as Psalms of Praise. And let me see if I can find it in Hebrew here. The text of Hallel. And let's see, full Hallel, blah, blah, blah. There's got to be a link here down at the bottom, I'm guessing. External links, Hallel, the Open Siddur Project, Hallel. That sounds pretty promising. So let's go over there. So Hallel are these psalms of praise that are sung on special occasions, on occasions of joy or joyfulness. And I think it's this one. Let's give it a whirl and see if it is this one. 118, perhaps. No, it's not this one. 1 second here. 117. No, it's not that one. Oh, and I have to share the screen differently. I will do that in a second. 116, I think. 113. I think maybe it's here. We go. I think it starts here. 113. Just give me 1 second. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. So I'm in the rabbinical Beit Knesset this morning, and let me share the screen a little bit differently here. Huh? What is that? Oh, I see what's going on here. All right, give me 1 second. Let's cut this out. And this goes bye-bye. And this goes bye-bye. That'll save a lot of confusion. So I'm in the rabbinical Beit Knesset this morning, and they start singing Hallel. And this is Psalm 113. Okay, and you could see oh, that's interesting. Praise the servants of the cause. So here they translate Yahweh as the cause. That's even weirder. I've never seen that before. But we're going to focus on the Hebrew, and I'm going to tell you what it actually says here in the Hebrew. So remember, the Rabbinites are singing this in their shul this morning. Okay, and I will read it as it says it, and then I'll read it as they sang it in the rabbinical shul, and I will show you the irony of the whole thing. So here it says hallelujah, hallelujah. You know, you've heard that word before. Hallelujah means praise Yahweh. Here they translate as praise the source, which is ridiculous. I'll make this a little bit bigger so it's easier for everyone to see. So hallelujah, praise Yah, which is a nickname or a shorthand for Yahweh. Hallelu Avdei Yahweh. May the servants of Yahweh praise him. Hallelu et Shem Yahweh. Praise the name Yahweh, or praise the name of Yahweh. So the rabbis are actually singing praise the name of Yahweh. Except what are they saying? They're saying, when they're singing it, they're saying Hallelu et Shem Adonai. It's insanity when you think about it. Here it says praise the name Yahweh, and they're reading it as praise the name Adonai. So instead of actually fulfilling the verse of praising the name Yahweh, what are they doing? They're substituting, they're disgracing the name Yahweh, or they're ignoring the name Yahweh, and they're replacing the word Yahweh with the word Adonai when they're actually singing the verse that says that you must praise, or that you should praise, the name of Yahweh. It's insanity when you think about it. Okay? And let's even go to the next verse. He Shem Yahweh Mivorach Me'atavi Adolam. May the name of Yahweh, or may the name Yahweh be blessed from now until and forever after, or until eternity. So may the name Yahweh be blessed from now till eternity. And what do they read it as? So here again, we have another verse that says that the name Yahweh should be blessed. And what are they saying? And when they read it, do they bless the name Yahweh? Do they even say the name Yahweh? No, they avoid saying the name Yahweh because of this 2,000 plus year old ban on the name. And they actually read this as Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Me'atavi Adonai. May the name Adonai be blessed from now until eternity. And let's even go on. Third verse. Mi Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mivo'o Mihulal Shem Yahweh. From the rising of the sun, meaning from the east, Ad Mivo'o, to the setting, to the west. It means basically from the far east to the far west. Mihulal Shem Yahweh. The name Yahweh is praised, or is to be praised, or is praised. So here the first three verses are saying, praise the name Yahweh. May the name Yahweh be blessed from now until eternity, throughout all of time. May Mizrach Shemesh Ad Mivo'o Mihulal Shem Yahweh. From the far east to the far west, from the rising of the sun to the setting of the sun, the name Yahweh is praised. So throughout all the earth, throughout all space on the earth, throughout all places on the earth, throughout all time, the name of Yahweh is to be blessed. The name of Yahweh is to be glorified. Okay? Praise the name Yahweh. And are they doing that when they're reading this? No. The Rabbinites, and sadly, they are, we could say, what's called tinokot nishba'u. Ironically, whenever I start saying my Karaite stuff, I'm always called this. This is a concept which basically means they it's not their fault. They're too unknowledgeable to know what they're doing. They know not what they do. And this is constantly what I'm told whenever I give my opinion pretty much about anything, because instead of actually relating to my opinion, I always get this, oh, what you're saying, it doesn't matter. I'm not mad at you. You're just a tinok shenishbu. It's like, I'm not mad at you telling us we have to say the name Yahweh, or I'm not mad at you telling us that in ancient times, or that we should go back to keeping the holidays by the actual observation of the new moon. You're just a tinok shenishba. You know not what you do. You're so so unknowledgeable that I'm not mad at you for saying this nonsense. You're too unknowledgeable to even be taken seriously. I get that all the time, and I always laugh. So yeah, it's like the Rabbinites are allergic to the name Yahweh. Absolutely, they most certainly are. The one thing that could bring us salvation, the one thing that could bring us help, and especially in these very difficult times for Jews here in Israel and Jews around the world, I mean, the shit is about to hit the fan. There's no doubt about it. And this is one of the reasons that I can't even say that I came to Katzrin, that I was told by Yahweh. And I don't mean that he came to me in a vision or a dream or a prophecy and told me to go to Katzrin, that he showed me that this is where I need to be. He basically through a lot of prayer and meditation and certain things that happened, he made it clear to me that I need to be in Katzrin. And he also made it clear to me that that one of the reasons, and perhaps the main reason, that I need to be here in Katzrin is to call out to the name Yahweh, to call out to his name, the true name Yahweh, to pray for the people here, to call out to his name, to ask for protection, and to protect the people of Israel, especially here in the northern border, where it is so volatile and so dangerous, and potentially even more dangerous, even though there is a lull now, because a bunch of people have been wiped out. The head of Hezbollah was wiped out. The head of Hamas was wiped out a couple of days ago, thank God. But it's like whack-a-mole. When one of these people dies, another one comes up, and the one that comes up is often more vicious than the one that's killed. So we'll see what happens. At any rate, so we see here that as the rabbis are saying this, that they are actually disobeying, or they're actually ignoring what the very verses they're reading are telling them to do. It's just irony of ironies. I'll tell you a couple of other things. So let's see. Where did I see? No, I think that's enough for now. So there are many, many, many verses throughout the Tanakh, that hundreds of verses that tell us to call out to the name of Yahweh, that tell us that we must call out to the name of Yahweh. We see, of course, people throughout the Tanakh only calling out to the name Yahweh when I say people, I mean good people, honest or God-fearing Israelites, only calling out to the name Yahweh, because that is the name of our God. If the other nations can call out to their false gods by name and not substitute the names of their false gods, whether it be Vishnu or Shiva or Chemosh or Molech or Baal or one of the Baalim or Ishtar, Isis or Jesus or whoever, then if they don't need to substitute the name for their false gods, they call out to their false gods by name. The insanity and the irony of the fact that we cannot call out to the true God by name when we're told hundreds of times throughout the Tanakh, and if not told explicitly hundreds of times, then shown by the behavior of true God-fearing, of true Yahweh-fearing Israelites, if not hundreds and thousands of times throughout the Tanakh, that they only call out and swear by the name Yahweh, then it's just an insane situation. So a lot more to say about this topic, and I will be doing more videos about this topic, but I think the point has been made. So we are required to, we are told to, that if we want to get Yahweh's attention, if we want to call out to him, if we want his mercy, if we want his salvation, if we want his attention, if we want his protection, then the only way to do it is call him by name, just as you would if you saw your friend Joe walking down the street in front of you. You would call him out, you would call out by name, rather than hey person or hey human being. Maybe he'd recognize your voice, maybe he wouldn't, but if you say hey Joe, for sure you're going to get his attention. There's no difference when we call out to Yahweh, because we are supposed to have as close a relationship with Yahweh as we have with our friend Bob or Joe or any other human being. So if we can call them by name, then we can certainly call Yahweh by name. He wants us to. He tells us to. In Exodus chapter 3, quite explicitly. Okay, so let's end that topic there. Can you be one of you can? Sorry. As a matter of fact, it's so funny you should mention this because a good friend of mine said that in order to build the Karaite community, what you need to do, this person happens to be a Christian, but she said what you need to do is you need to find 12 apostles. And I said, you know what? That sounds like actually really good idea, because it's like when Moses went to God and he said, I cannot bear this nation on my own. It's too much. And then God told Moses to lay his hands on the elders, and the elders received a certain amount of Moses' spirit, and then they helped him run the nation. Well, I certainly can't do this by myself. So yes, I'm looking for 12 apostles. Maybe 12 is not a good number. How about 7 apostles or something like that? We won't go 12. It's too loaded when it comes to apostles. So yes, please, not only can you be, I'm begging you. I am literally begging you. Yes, come move to Katsuin and help me run this community. And anyone else who has the desire to do so, please, now is the time. Move to Israel. If you're already in Israel, move to Katsrin, and let's kick this community off the ground, because the future of the people of Israel, I really, really believe from the bottom of my heart, depends on this. We're the only ones out there who are doing what we're doing, and the work is very, very important, and the time is very short. Okay, let's move on now to the body of today's study. That's going to be Leviticus chapter 20. I'll take a break for 2 minutes. I'll put on a song, and we will take it from there. And actually, I'll get my plugs to plug in while I'm doing it, so I don't have to do it later. Let's see. Let's see what we got here.
שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, בואי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעמשה, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, ובואי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעמשה, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 אוי, נה 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 לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מאימה שעושה שמיים בארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם.
Okay, we're back and we're going to start the main body of the Torah study right now. And we're going to be, finally, we finished Leviticus chapter 19. It took us 5 weeks, actually more, because I think I skipped a week or two in between. So it took us about 2 months to just go through Leviticus 19. I think Leviticus 20 is going to move a little bit more quickly. And believe it or not, we are approaching the end of the book of Leviticus, kind of. So there are 27 chapters in Leviticus. We're up to chapter 20. And I really feel like the study of Leviticus has been, at least for me so far, has been absolutely amazing. I love it. I think people overlook it. They don't like to get into the technical details of the sacrificial system, of the system of purity and impurity, or being clean and unclean, or having the cooties and getting cleaned of the cooties. And I find it absolutely fascinating. Because it shows the lengths that you have to go through before you step into the castle of the king, the true king, the king of kings, the king of heaven and earth, the house of Yahweh, and the details of what can muck you up, dirty you up, so that you cannot approach the place and how you can clean yourself up so that you can approach the place. And I think it's just as interesting to me as what does not dirty one up in the eyes of Yahweh. So the classic example is dog crap or cow crap or horse crap. If you get covered in or if you step in dog dew, that does not make you unclean. Yahweh doesn't really. I'm not saying you should walk into the house of Yahweh covered in cow poop or something like that. That's kind of common sense, but it doesn't disqualify you from approaching the house of Yahweh. Whereas other things such as contact with the dead, such as contact even with dead animals, such as contact with seminal emissions and all the other things that we saw there, that is something above and beyond just being dirty. That's something that's just icky and gross is not the word, icky, and gives you the cooties. It's like ugh, kind of thing, right? Like it's above and beyond dirty, and that is what Yahweh is concerned with. But we've passed those parts of Leviticus 20, and now we're going to go into Leviticus, and now we're going to start in Leviticus 20. Leviticus 20 is an interesting chapter. It kind of rehashes a lot of the laws that we saw in the previous couple of chapters, especially Leviticus 18. And as the Torah always does, when it rehashes the laws, it says the rehashing, it says it slightly differently. It expounds upon it. It expands upon it. It gives insight into the laws. Whenever laws are repeated in the Torah, I won't say whenever, but just about always when laws are repeated in the Torah, they are repeated with slightly different words. And of course, the secular scholars see this as evidence that the Torah is written by different authors. Hence, they come up with this theory called the documentary hypothesis, where different parts of the Torah are written by different authors. And the reason there's repetition is because one author said it in a certain way and another author said it in another way. They'd heard about that same law from wherever, maybe from a common source or just from common culture or common law living in the land of Canaan at the time, and so therefore that's why there are repetitions of laws in the Torah according to secular scholars. That's a load of absolute, excuse my French, bullshit. Okay, the reason that laws are repeated, I do not believe there's any more than one author for the Torah. I believe that author is essentially Moshe. It's possible that maybe later scribes took together a lot of the writings and sayings of Moshe and coordinated it into a book. I'll give that possibility, but it certainly is not from many different sources. And so therefore, the reason when the Torah repeats the laws, it's to emphasize those laws. We say every Torah study that repetition is emphasis. We see this when words are repeated. We see this when phrases are repeated in slightly different in a synonymous form. So the repetition of the phrase uses slightly different words from the first repetition of the phrase often, and it's done to emphasize. It's done to get the point across. And we know that in ancient times, people did not sit down and read books. There was no printing press. There were no books. The written word was very scarce. If it was written on papyrus, or if it was written on animal parchment, or if it was carved into stone or carved into clay tablets, these were things that required a lot of effort. It required a special scribal class, people who knew how to write and knew how to do these things. And so the written word was few and far between. It's not like today, where let's even think about 30 years ago, before the internet was popular, 40 years ago, before the internet was popular, how common it was to have access to a certain book then, or a certain piece of information then, and now, since the days of the internet, how common it is to have access to a certain piece of information. In the old days, you either had to have the book in your house, or you had to borrow it from a friend, or you had to go to a public library. And so the written word was more scarce 30 years ago than it is now, where now you could just pop open your computer or your smartphone that you take with you wherever you go, and you have access at the tip of your fingers, your fingertips, to pretty much any book, any written word, anywhere in the history of humanity that still exists to this day, right? So maybe that's a good analogy. If we extrapolate backwards, then in the 1400s or so, the printing press was invented, or what became common in the West. I think it was actually invented in China earlier, kind of like pasta, and that was another watershed. That was another revolution. Where now the written word became much more nafotz, became much more, what's the word for nafotz in English? Became much more spread out, became much more common. And before that, then again, you had to have scribes that copied, like the Masoretes did. They didn't have any printing press. They would copy by hand meticulously from one parchment to another parchment. So that you have, for instance, the Leningrad Codex, which is believed, if I'm not mistaken, was copied from the Aleppo Codex by hand. And so in ancient times, again, the written word, written text was very scarce. It was expensive, and you needed a special class of people called the Sofrim, or called the scribes. Scribes are mentioned a number of times in the Tanakh. For instance, Shaphan, the scribe in 2 Kings chapter 22, is the one who informs, who finds the book of the Torah that is then reported back to King Josiah, that this book of the Torah has been found, and there are many other examples as well. But so the Torah was basically, or all things were basically, transmitted in those days by readings, out loud readings, or perhaps you can have the written word published not published, but carved into stone, or carved into a public place, like the Code of Hammurabi. That's how they found the Code of Hammurabi. They found the stone that was, I believe it was stone, that was carved into. Okay, but the word information was basically transmitted by reading it aloud. I don't want to use the word orally, because that's a loaded word. It's not an oral law. It's a written word that's read aloud. And so therefore, we know when we're trying to get a point across, we may want to repeat things, especially if we're doing it orally and it's not written. We may want to repeat things 3 times. Like if any of you ever have had or have wives, then you may know this phenomenon, that if your wife wants you to go to the store and get I don't know, 2% milk, she's not going to tell you 1 time, right? She's probably not even going to tell you 2 or 3 times. She may tell you 10 times not to forget the 2% milk when you go to the store, because she wants to emphasize the fact that you better come back. If you know what's good for you, your ass better come back with that 2% milk, or else you're going to be sleeping on the couch or in the doghouse that night, right? So it's the same idea. So laws are repeated because they need to be emphasized, because they were read out loud, and so they're read slightly differently, because when you say things slightly differently, it gets the point across better. So again, let's use the wife analogy. Honey, please don't forget to get the 2% milk when you go to the Stop and Shop. And then 5 minutes later, oh honey, remember, I want that low fat milk when you go to the supermarket, right? If you say it a little bit differently, it kind of gets the point across. It kind of triangulates that point that you want to get across, or it expands upon it. Like, oh, honey, the first time it might be just get the 2% milk. Honey, remember, I get the half-gallon carton of the 2% milk, not the quart size 2% milk, right? So now the first time the basic idea was placed into your head, and now the second time it's being expanded upon, because if you put too much information into, right, in the eyes of our wives, where we're all dumb, so you have to give a little bit of information at a time. If you give too much information at once, it may spill out the other side of the brain, and then you're going to forget to get the 2% milk, or you're going to get the wrong kind. So the first time, just get the 2% milk, and then the second time, oh, make sure it's the quart, make sure it's the half gallon and not the quart. Okay, so being kind of trying to be funny and facetious, but it really gets the point across. That's why the Torah repeats commandments, repeats points, repeats ideas, And that's why it does so using different words, because it wants to get the point across and it wants to expand upon it. And if you take the totality of everything that's said throughout all those repetitions, then you kind of get the full idea of what Yahweh is speaking about. Yes, sometimes it does repeat word for word, like lo tivashel gedi b'chelev amo, do not cook a kid in its mother's milk. But then I guess there's nothing more to say about it, so it's just a straight up repetition. Okay, that being said, we're now in Leviticus chapter 20, and let's start reading. And we'll see that some of the laws we have seen before, either in Leviticus 19 or Leviticus 18 or elsewhere. Okay, so verse 1, please follow along in English if you know, or if you're learning Biblical Hebrew, follow along in the Hebrew. If not, then follow along in your English or your favorite language, such as perhaps Serbian or something like that. It's always a tip my hat to my good friend out there. You know who you are. And so here we go. Verse 1. Vayidaber Yahweh and Moshe limor. So Yahweh spoke to Moses and said, and this is a typical kind of opening sentence. Verse 2. Wa'el b'nei Yisrael tomer ish ish mivnei Yisrael umin Hagar b'Yisrael asher yiten mi zera'o lemolech mot yumat am haaretz yirgemu oto. Yirgemuhu ba'aven. So this is a prohibition against passing your children through the fire to Molech, sacrificing your children to Molech. Verse 2, so let me translate. So to the children of Israel, you shall say, Ish ish. We've seen this phrase ish ish before. Again, notice the repetition. This literally means man, man. Okay, but it's usually translated as each person or each and every person. The repetition is for emphasis, and so ish ish is really used. It's often used when the Torah wants to point out that this is something that every single person better follow and better pay attention to. It's a way of pointing out the importance of this law, and for sure it is. Child sacrifice is disgusting and perhaps one of the most reviled, if not the most reviled, custom or behavior of the nations that Yahweh is excoriating throughout the Torah, and that we are replacing in the land of Israel. So Mivnei Yisrael. So, okay, I'm sorry, I was translating. So every single person from among the children of Israel and among the Ger that lives in Israel, meaning lives among the children of Israel, any person. Why is my cat screaming? Hold on 1 second, please. Shoshi boy, what's the matter, sweetheart? Shohan? What's the matter, Shoshi? What is going on? Shoshi, no, you can't come in. Okay, I'm going to feed you guys soon. As soon as the Torah study's over, you guys get tuna fish. Okay, sorry about that. Cat issues. So here it points out, and again, it's emphasizing. Here it's emphasizing among the children of Israel and among the Gerim. The Gerim are the adopted children of Israel. They are those who cannot trace the patrilineal lineage back to Yaakov, but who have come to join the nation. I always give the example of a family that has biological children and has adopted children. And if it's a good family, then the adopted children feel as loved and as part of the family as the biological children. Okay. But again, it points out both the children of Israel and the Ger, because this is so important. And he uses the word ish ish, the repetition, because this is so important. We know this is an important commandment because we know how much Yahweh reviles. I almost said Hashem, hanging around the Rabbanites too much. We know how much Yahweh reviles this sacrifice to Molech. So anyone who gives of his seed, who gives his seed to Molech, mot yumat, shall certainly be put to death. Again, we have repetition, mot yumat. It means mot is well, the only way to translate it is shall certainly be put to death, or shall be put to death. Ama aretz yirgemuhu ba'aven, and the people of the land, meaning the rest of the children of Israel, shall stone him, shall pelt him to death with stones. Okay. let's see what Robert Alter has to say, if anything, about that. We'll go to our usual go-to. So the list of prohibited acts that begins here mirrors the one that takes up chapter 18. That's what we said. That chapter and the present one are two panels separated by the paraphrase of the Decalogue in chapter 19. So we saw in chapter 19 that we mentioned this when we were studying 19 over a period of about 7 weeks or so, that a bunch of the Ten Commandments of the Ten Commandments are referenced in chapter 19. What is couched in chapter 18 as a series of imperatives is recast here in the language of case law, causistically, with the punishment for each offense now stipulated. That addition gives a focusing or quasi-narrative development to the relationship between the parallel lists of laws. So what Robert Alter is saying in his usual kind of academic highfalutin sense is that here we're getting pretty much a repetition of chapter 18, but now there's going to be expansion upon it. Very specifically, we're going to get some of the punishments for these violations, whereas 18 was kind of a warning: don't do this, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that, don't act in the way that the Egyptians did, where you're the country that you're leaving, and don't act the way that the Canaanites do in the land that you are going to go in to take over. Now that's going to be fleshed out with the actual punishments. There it was trying to get the point across, what not to do, and here it's now going to flesh it out a little bit more. This is a classic example of what we said, where we have repetition, but we're going to have additions of information here. Okay, so we know that passing the your child through the fire, the death is the punishment is death. If we had more time, which we don't, we would speak about it very quickly. Just read the verses very quickly. And just have to remember chapter and verse. Let's say anything. Wikipedia, Gehenna. Yeah, Jeremiah 19. Jeremiah 7. So let's look very quickly at Jeremiah chapter 7. Jeremiah chapter 7. And let's just look at the English for a second. So in Jeremiah chapter 7, right, reform your ways and your actions. Will you steal and murder, commit adultery and perjury, burn incense to Baal, and follow other gods you have not known? And then come and stand before me in this house which bears my name, and say, we are safe to do all these detestable things. Has this house which bears my name become a den of robbers to you? But I have been watching, declares not the Lord, but declares Yahweh. Go now to the place in Shiloh. Shiloh was pretty much the permanent place, the semi-permanent place of the tabernacle, of the Mishkan, of the Ohel Moed, before it was moved to Jerusalem. There was intermediate stages where it was not in either place. But Shiloh was kind of the first, was before Jerusalem, the semi-permanent place of the tabernacle, until Yahweh made it clear to David that Jerusalem was to be the place. So, right, go now to the place. And by the way, I heard a lecture this past week which claims that the structure there was more than just a tent. It was more than just a tabernacle that was set up in the desert, but actually some semblance of permanent structure was built there, almost like a temple. So this person, I think, brilliantly said that Shiloh was the place of the first temple, Jerusalem was the second temple, and then when the temple was destroyed and rebuilt in the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, that was actually the third temple, and now we're waiting for the fourth temple. At any rate, go now to Shiloh, where I first made a dwelling for my name, and see what I did to it because of the wickedness of my people Israel. While you were doing all these things, declares Yahweh, I spoke to you again and again, but you did not listen. I called you, but you did not answer. Therefore, what I did to Shiloh, I will now do to the house that bears my name, the temple you trust in. This is now talking about the temple in Jerusalem, because this is Jeremiah. He's already speaking at the very end of the exile. He was the prophet during the time that the Babylonians, in fact, the book of Jeremiah ends with the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians and destruction of the temple by the Babylonians. The place I gave to you and your ancestors will thrust you from my presence as I did all your fellow Israelites, the people of Ephraim. That's talking about the northern kingdom that was conquered and exiled by the Assyrians, by Tiglath-Pileser III, approximately 150, if I'm not mistaken, years earlier than when the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem. So do not pray for this people, nor offer any plea or petition for them. Do not plead with me, for I will not listen to you. Do you not see what they are doing in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem? The children gather wood, the fathers light the fire, and the women knead the dough and make cakes to offer to the Queen of Heaven, Malkat Shemayim, one of the foreign gods that the Israelites were worshiping and serving. They pour out drink offerings to other gods to rouse my anger, but am I the one they are provoking, declares Yahweh? Are they not rather harming themselves to their own shame? Therefore, this is what the sovereign Lord says, sovereign Yahweh says, my anger and my wrath will be poured out on this place, again speaking about the temple, on man and beast, on the trees of the field, and on the crops of your land, and it will burn and not be quenched. This is what Yahweh Almighty, the God of Israel, says. Go ahead, add your burnt offerings to your other sacrifices, and eat the meat yourselves. For when I brought your ancestors out of Egypt and spoke to them, I did not just give them commandments about burnt offerings and sacrifices, but I gave them this command: obey me, and I will be your God, and you will be my people. Walk in obedience to all I command you, that it may go well with you. But they did not listen or pay attention. Instead, they followed the stubborn inclinations of their evil hearts. They went backward and not forward. From the time your ancestors left Egypt until now, day after day, again and again, I sent you my servants, the prophets, but they did not listen to me or pay attention. They were stiff-necked. They did more evil than their ancestors. When you tell them all this, they will not listen to you. God speaking, Yahweh speaking to Jeremiah. When you call to them, they will not answer. Therefore, say to them, this is the nation that has not obeyed Yahweh, its God, or responded to correction. Truth has perished. It has vanished from their lips. Cut off your hair and throw it away. This is now a sign of mourning, cutting off your hair. Okay? Or a sign of agony. Take up a lament on the barren heights, for Yahweh has rejected and abandoned this generation that is under his wrath. The people of Judah have done evil in my eyes, declares Yahweh. They have set up their detestable idols in the house that bears my name and have defiled it. They've built the high places of Tophet in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it enter my mind. We'll just read to the end. So beware. Days are coming, declares Yahweh, when people will no longer call it Tophet or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter, for they will bury the dead in Tophet until there's no more room, meaning the dead Judeans, the dead Jews that the Babylonians kill. Then the carcasses of this people will become food for the birds and the wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. I will bring an end to the sounds of joy and gladness, and to the voices of bride and bridegroom in the towns of Judah and in the streets of Jerusalem, for the land will become desolate. And this last phrase is repeated a number of times throughout the Tanakh, sometimes as it being taken away, the sounds of joy and gladness, and sometimes as it being restored eventually. Anyway, there's a song that is sung. So, okay, so The point is here we have mentioned in 31 and 32. This is the key for our study in Leviticus 20. They've built the high places of Tophet. Nobody exactly knows what the word Tophet means. I will point out that when I was in Tunisia visiting Carthage in 2018, there's a place there called Tophet where it was believed, although it is perhaps not true, some believe that the Romans made up a lie about the Carthaginians, that they carried out child sacrifice, but perhaps they did in a place that is called Tophet in the ancient ruins of Carthage. And there they found remains of burnt children, and it's a whole story in and of itself. But this word Tophet actually made its way into other languages. It was called already at the time, in ancient times, it was called by the Romans, I believe, or perhaps by the Carthaginians themselves, Tophet, because it was a place where child sacrifice took place. But at any rate, nobody really knows what this word Tophet means, but it's clear that it was in the valley of Ben Hinnom. Where is the valley of Ben Hinnom? It's on the southern, so Jerusalem is kind of the old city of Jerusalem, or I should say the city of David. The original Jerusalem is it's kind of an outcropping or a mountain or hill that has valleys on three sides. To the east is the Kidron Valley, and to the south is the valley of the children of Hinnom. Ge B'nai Hinnom, that later turned into the word Gehenom and came to mean hell. So, and even in other languages, even in Arabic, the word for hell is Genom, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, and it comes from the Hebrew word Gehenom, which really means Ge B'nai Hinnom. That means Ge is the valley. B'nai Hinnom are the sons of Hinnom. So in this place on the southern extremity, or in the valley below the on the southern side of the city of David, this is apparently where this high places of Tophet were built for the Israelites to pass their children through the fire, to burn their children and sacrifice them. It doesn't mention Molech here explicitly, but to sacrifice their children by burning to some foreign god, ostensibly Molech. Okay. All right. So that's enough. I can go on talking about this for another half an hour because it's really fascinating. But let's move on. If you come to Israel, you can visit the valley of the children of Hinnom. In fact, they just built kind of a bridge there. It's really fascinating. They built a bridge. It's really nice that goes over the valley of the children of Hinnom, Ge B'nai Hinnom, and it gives an amazing view. But if you actually go down into the valley, it's also very fascinating as well. And today it's kind of a picnic spot. Okay, let's move on because I don't want chapter 20 to take 7 weeks as chapter 19 did. So we'll move on to chapter 3. We get the idea. Do not carry out child sacrifice. Verse 3. Wa ani ten et panai ba'ish hahu והכרעתי אותו מקרב עמו, כי מזרעו נתן למולך למען טמא את מקדשי ולחלל את שם קדשי. So let's translate this. I will place my face, I will set my face against the man, that man, meaning anyone who sacrifices his children to Molech, anyone who passes his children through fire. And here we have Molech mentioned once again, and here we have fire mentioned as well, right? One second. No, it doesn't mention passing through fire here. I'm sorry, my mistake. And doesn't mention it in the previous verse. No, it doesn't mention fire here. Okay. But in other places it does. Okay. So I will place my face against that man, anyone who sacrifices a child to Molech, and I will cut him off from the midst of his people. Nobody knows exactly what that means, but the most basic, the most plausible explanation is basically his excision, is basically considered no longer to be an Israelite, maybe thrown out into the desert, or maybe even thrown out of the land of Israel, basically cut off from the people, right? Just like if your parents cut you off or something like that, or I don't know, your uncle cuts you off or whoever, right? Kind of the same idea. Kimizar onatan Molech, because he gave his seed to Molech, lema'an tameh et mikdashi, and in doing so, he defiled, he made impure, he gave the cooties to, right? It's almost like the same thing as it is the same thing as defiling my holy place, my sanctuary, and he profaned, he made a mockery, or he made common my holy name. So lechalel and lekadesh, or chol and kodesh, are opposites. We've mentioned this before. Lechalel means profane, but not in the sense of curse out or something like that. Profane means to make something that is special into something that is common. So if I were to take, I don't know, let's say a cup from the White House, and I were to use it and I were to steal it, which I wouldn't mind doing, to be honest, and I would steal the cup from the White House that was used by Abraham Lincoln to drink, I don't know, wine or something like that, and I steal it on my when I'm going on my White House tour, and I bring it back home, and I put it in my living room, and I use it to store pens. I put pens and pencils, and I use it as a pencil holder. Then that is taking something that is holy, or something that is special, and set aside, and I won't say holy, but you get the idea, and making it into something that is profane, something that has special meaning, and turn it into something regular. That's what the word lechalel means. It means, and it's the opposite of kodesh, kachi. Okay, my holy name. Shem kachi is my holy name. Again, here we have a reference to the name of Yahweh that we spoke about at the beginning of this study. So I'm taking something that is holy, that is special, that is set apart, that has special meaning, and is consecrated, and I'm just turning it into something ordinary. I'm turning it into something common. So that's exactly what Yahweh says here, that you will have cootied up, or dirtied up, or defiled my sanctuary, and you will have made common. You've made my holy name into something that is just regular, doesn't have any specialness to it. Again, usually they use the word profane, but the word profane, even though its true meaning means exactly that, it means something that's profane is something that is just not special, or set aside, or holy. It's the opposite of holy. But when we use the word profane in this day and age, it's misunderstood because it's connected to the word profanity, and its meaning has changed. So I like to explain exactly what that means when it says you've profaned my holy name. This means you've taken something that is special. My holy name is special, and you've just stomped all over it and turned it into something ordinary. You've turned my name into a doormat. Okay. See if there's any comments from our boy Robert Alter. So I shall set my face. The literal sense of the verb is give, thus making a measure for measure, exposure, response to give a seed to Molech. Okay, fair enough. Nice comment. Once more, and set so as to defile my sanctuary. Once more, we see the preoccupation of all the segments of Leviticus with preserving the sacred integrity of the sanctuary. A heinous act such as child sacrifice is not only intrinsically abhorrent, but also conveys pollution to the sanctuary of Yahweh. And I think maybe there's something else that is underlying this. You will defile my sanctuary. Oops, I just clicked on that, which I didn't do. Back. And that is that perhaps the implication here is that Yahweh is expecting or saying that this sacrificing to Molech will take place in his sanctuary, as we see. Is it in the book of Ezekiel? Is it mentioned explicitly? I don't want to say something I'm not sure of, but we do see in Jeremiah, of course, in Jeremiah 7, that it takes place in the valley of the children of Hinnom, which is in the valley below the sanctuary. But perhaps the implication here is that this kind of child sacrifice is actually going to be done in the sanctuary. That instead of the temple being a place of worship to Yahweh, that is Yahweh. The Torah here is saying that people will actually be sacrificing to Molech in the sanctuary of Yahweh. As we do see, I don't know if it mentions Molech explicitly or child sacrifice explicitly, but if you go to, I believe it's Ezekiel 10 and 11, Ezekiel speaks about all of the horrors that he sees the Israelites doing, and such as sacrificing unclean animals on the altar, sacrificing, I believe it mentions there, to the Queen of Heaven, which we also saw in Jeremiah, and doing all kinds of other things. Again, I don't want to get bogged down, but if you look at Ezekiel 10 or 11, it might mention also that child sacrifice took place in, although I believe it doesn't there. But okay, let's move on. Verse 5, Wasamti ani et panai ba'ishahu u b'mishpachto wa הכרעתי אותו ואת כל הזונים אחריו לזנות אחרי המולך מקרב עמם. So we're really like, there's a lot of repetition and emphasis here in many different ways. We saw at the beginning, we saw the phrase ish being used, right? Each and every man, man, person. We saw that it's explicitly pointed out that it's not just the children of Israel, but also the Gerim, okay, the quote unquote converts. We saw here, well, that's common, the Mot Yumat, and we see repetition twice that if anyone does this, then I will put my face against them, I will go against them, and I will cut them off. And again, here we have the same thing. I'm sorry, that was in verse 3. Right, in verse 4. I'm sorry, where is it? What did I do here? Right, on verse 3. I don't know what I think I read the same verse twice. Sorry, let's go on to 4. Verse 4. Ve'im ha'elem ya'alimu am ha'aretz et einehem min ha'ish hahu. No, wait a second. I see. I skipped a verse. That's what it is. Okay. I went to verse 5. Let's go back to verse 4. Ve'im ha'elem ya'alimu am ha'aretz et einehem min ha'ish hahu v'tito mizar'o lemolech lebirti hamitoto. So to make it, okay, I'll translate. And if the people of the land, remember the people of the land are to take this person who is sacrificing their child to Molech, and they're to stone him, right? It's not going to be an execution by the judges. It's going to be the common people. The people are going to gather together and stone this person themselves and kill this person themselves with stones. So if they should in any way, shape, or form hide their eyes, if the people of the land should in any way, shape, or form hide their eyes from that man, betito mizaro lemolech, when he gives after he's given his seed to Molech, after he's given his child to Molech, the bilti amitoto, and not kill him, by not killing him, verse 5, Besamti ani et panai ba'ish hahu ubemishpachto v'ichrati oto ve'et kol hazonim acharao liznot achrei hamolech mikerev hamam. So if anyone decides to ignore, it's okay, we're not gonna, okay, so he's sacrificing his child to Molech, that's not our business, so we're just gonna let it be. We don't see it really as a big deal. Then I will set my face against that person, meaning the person who's ignoring it or the people who are ignoring it, with mishpachto and his entire family. Why his entire family? What did his entire family do wrong? Well, the underlying assumption here is that his family also was with him in not making a big deal out of the other person sacrificing his children to Molech. And I will cut him off, meaning the person who's ignored the seriousness of this transgression that he sees another person doing. And all of those who stray after him, liznot achrei hamolech mikerev hamam, to stray or to whore themselves. The related word would be zonah. The word zonah is literally a whore, so maybe a good translation. Sometimes they translate it as to whore himself, but really it means to stray after. But So kol hazonim acharav liznot achrei hamolech. So all of those who stray with him or stray after him to whore themselves or to stray um stray after the molech mikerav amam. So I will cut them off from their people as well. To make a long story short, if the rest of the people do not raise hell over the fact that they see others or they see certain people in the nation sacrificing their children to Molech, then they are held responsible and they're also cut off from their people. There's also excision. They're also excised from the people of Israel because they didn't say anything, they didn't do anything, they didn't make a big deal of it. It's kind of like in the big cities of the United States that no one is making a big deal if people rip off stores under $1,000. So those people, who's the guy in New York, the big fat, whatever, I won't say the word. You can extrapolate. The big fat dude, Alvin Braggs or something like that. I don't even live in New York. I haven't been in New York since 2020. So I think Alvin Braggs or Alvin Bragg or something like that, right? So he doesn't do anything about shoplifting in New York. You can walk into any store and you can steal up to $1,000, and it's considered a misdemeanor, and it's usually not prosecuted, and the people don't even get a slap on the wrist. So what's happening? If you watch one of my favorite channels about New York to watch on the internet, if you really want to get a guy that really is kind of documenting the complete disintegration of the so-called greatest city in the world, never was, it's always been a hellhole, but the city of New York, watch a YouTube channel called Cash Jordan, and he really brings out, he really mamchish, he really makes it very visceral, all of the disintegration of the city of New York. So, but this guy Alvin Bragg, because he's not prosecuting shoplifters, is causing the entire society to fall apart, and therefore he's responsible as well. He's not doing anything. He sees all of this crime taking place, and he's just hiding his eyes from it. He's ignoring it, and so therefore, if it were a Torah state, then he would perhaps be thrown out of New York, or maybe even stoned to death for not doing anything about all of the crime that's taking place. And that's the idea that's being expressed here. If you see this going on, if the people of the land see this going on and they don't raise hell about it, they don't make a big deal over it, and they don't kill the person who is sacrificing his children to Molech, because child sacrifice, I mean, what is more disgusting than that, right? There's little that's more disgusting than sacrificing your own child or sacrificing children to a foreign god. Then now the people who don't raise hell over it are now also punished. They're also excised. They're also expelled from the nation of Israel. Okay. All right. So that concludes verse 5. Any questions? Any comments? So they had an event consisting of a mob executing. Absolutely. We see this explicitly in a number of cases. We see this in the case of, is it the wood gatherer, the blasphemer? I believe in both cases that stones are cast. Okay, hence in the New Testament, I'm sorry, I need to point this out once again, but I'm not a Christian or Messianic in any way, shape, or form. Just referencing it as an historical document. We have the famous statement of Jesus / Yeshua, who says, he who has sinned, let him cast the first stone. So Yeshua is in a certain sense undermining this idea that people should be punished. See, this is why I do, when I read the New Testament, I do like some of what Yeshua, Jesus, has to say. I don't think he's a God. I don't think he's a son of God. I don't think he's even Messiah. I don't think he was or will be Messiah. But I like some of what he has to say. I like his anti-Pharisaic stance. I like his hyper legalistic stance. But there are some things he says that are crazy. And that idea of he who has sinned, let him cast the first stone, is a crazy idea, because then it means no one's ever going to be punished. Okay, obviously we've all sinned, and if no one's ever punished just because we're not perfect people, then obviously chaos is going to ensue in any society. Okay, but yes, they did have I wouldn't call it mob justice. I would call it organized mob justice. In other words, the mob just can't get up one day and decide we're going to stone this person to death. If the judges decide that this person is guilty and should be stoned to death, then it's carried out by the mob. It's carried out by the people, because it's the people who are there to see this. They're to witness it. They're to be part of it. It's to get the idea across of how horrible the thing this is, and maybe even get the idea across that if they don't do it themselves, then, or if they don't, if they ever do it themselves, then this is the punishment they're going to face. Okay, verse 6. So we saw this in Leviticus 19 in the previous chapter. והנפש אשר תפנה אל האובות ואל הידעונים לזנות אחריהם ונתתי את פניי בנפש ההיא והכרעתי אותו מקרב עמו. So any person or a person, and here we don't have the same emphasis, right? There's no ish, every single person. There's no mibnei Israel, Ger God Israel, and the Ger who lives among Israel. So this is serious, but we can get an idea by the language of the Torah which are the more serious violations, or which are the more serious transgressions, and which are the less serious ones. And yes, there is a hierarchy. There are certain things that one must do, which are more important than other things. So, for instance, bringing the Passover offering on the end of the 14th, on the evening of the 14th, when the 14th is going out and the 15th is coming in of the first month, is extremely important. And if anyone does that, it's mentioned explicitly that that person should be cut off. So that's super important. Okay, maybe not as important. I'm not saying that the lesser important ones are not important, but in the hierarchy, maybe a lesser important commandment might be, I don't know, what would be an example of, I don't know, I can't think of something offhand, but you get the idea. Okay, I don't want to say it because I don't want to people get the impression that certain commandments are not important. They're all important, but some are super important and some are just important. Okay, and maybe there are a couple more hierarchical levels than that. But at any rate, we see here by the language that this is bad, right? Speaking to the ovot and the idonim, the mediums and the familiar spirits is the way it's usually translated as, basically raising the dead to ask them questions of what I should do, as we saw in, was it 2 Samuel chapter 28 with the Ov Endor, with the witch of Endor. We read about that last week when we were speaking about the mediums and the familiar spirits in the previous chapter, in Leviticus chapter 19. But here we don't see the same repetition, the same language, right? This Molech, the prohibition against Molech took up 5 verses. There was a lot of repetition, both in individual words and in entire sentences, kind of repeating themselves. And here we don't see that same emphasis. So this is bad, but raising the dead, contacting the dead to ask them a question, is not as horrible crime as burning your child in fire as a sacrifice to a foreign god, right? I think we can intuitively understand that and agree with that. Okay. Verse 6, so anyone who turns towards the mediums and the familiar spirits, that's the way it's usually translated. Lisnot acharem, and here we have again lisnot, to whore themselves or to stray. Let's see how they translate it here. To prostitute himself. So they do pick up on the underlying meaning of the words zanna, or zan, zayin, nun. I guess it would be zayin, nun, hey, which is to become a whore or to prostitute oneself. So, but the idea is, right, you're well, you get the idea, right? To whore oneself after them, and then I will place my face against that person. Again, we have this statement of placing my face against, right? And placing my face against means, very briefly, we want Yahweh to turn his face towards us. Okay, turn towards us. Okay, we even see this in the Ya'ir Panav Elecha. In the priestly blessing, it says Ya'ir Panav Elecha, may he enlighten or shine his face upon you. So that's Yahweh turning his face towards you. You don't want him to turn his face against you. Okay, so when he turns his face towards you, then that is he's figuratively speaking doing good for you. When he turns his face against you, then he's out to get you. He's after you. Okay, but that's the expression that's used. Okay, or when he hides his face, we see that also. Then he's nowhere to be found, and when you need him, then you're going to be in trouble. Okay, if you kick the police, if you defund the police, then don't go looking for them when someone comes and does a home invasion on your house, because you've caused the police to hide their faces. So we have in the Torah this concept of Yahweh turning his face towards you, placing his face against you, or just hiding his face altogether. And in this case, it's placing his face against you, putting his face against you, meaning, he's out to get you, man. He's coming after you. So v'natati et panai b'nefesh ahi. So I will place my face against this person, v'yichrati oto mikarav amo, and I will cut him off from among his people. So we have the same language as the previous commandments regarding Molech. That in Molech it said, I will turn my face against the person who does it. I will turn my face against the people if they ignore the person who does it. If they say, oh, okay, we're just, no big deal. And those people will all be cut off from the nation of Israel. Here we have the same thing, that if anyone turns to the mediums and the familiar spirits, if anyone tries to contact the dead to ask them questions, as King Saul, as Shaul did when he went to the of Endor, when he went to the witch of Endor and had her raise up Samuel, who had recently died, the prophet Samuel, to ask him a question. So anyone who does that, then I will turn my face against him and I will cut him off from among his people. Okay, throw him out of the nation of Israel. Revoke his membership card is very possibly what that means. Maybe in ancient times it meant actually having the person thrown out of the land of Israel. Nobody really 100% knows what it means, but we can only speculate. Okay, let's see. Is any commentary here from Robert Alter on that one? No. So, verse 7, Wahit kadishtem, wahitem kedoshim, ki ani Yahweh Elohechem. So here we have again, remember, Leviticus chapter 17 through 26, if I'm not mistaken, the numbers are called the Holiness Code, and we have a repetition of be holy because I am holy, I am Yahweh, right? We saw in chapter 19 that there was a pattern of just about every second verse ended with Ani Yahweh or Ani Yahweh Elohechem, and at the end it ended with Ani Yahweh Elohechem asher hotzeti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Yahweh, your God, who took you out of the land of Egypt. So we're constantly being reminded that He's holy, we should be holy, and who is it who's speaking to us? Don't forget, Ani Yahweh Elohechem. I'm Yahweh, your God, which is a form of emphasis or a form of putting a stamp of, stamped officially by the king. In this case, the true king, the King of Kings. Hit kadishtem, and you shall make yourselves holy. Vaitim kadoshim, and by doing so you shall become holy. Ki ani Yahweh Elohechem, because I am Yahweh your God. So you become holy because or you are holy because I'm Yahweh your God. If you follow my commandments, then since I am holy, you become holy like I am, I think is the implication there. Verse 8, V'shamartem et chukotai wa'asitem otam ani Yahweh mikadishchem, and you shall keep my statutes and you shall do them. Ani Yahweh mikadishchem, I am Yahweh who makes you holy, your holifier. Maybe it would be a good way to translate it. They translate it, who sanctifies you. Robert Alter translates that as, it's verse 8. He always gives nice translations, so let's see what he says. Statutes and do that. I'm the Lord who makes you holy. Okay. Right? Mikadishchem, who holifies you. I like it better that way because it's a single word in Hebrew. So instead of makes you holy, maybe who holifies you. Okay. And I think he has a comment on verse 8. I'm the Lord who makes you holy. This refrain-like line, which is the ultimate rationale for all the prohibited acts with their stipulated punishments, is the thematic center of the chapter. Give me one. Let's do verse 9, and then just give me 1 second. To go grab some water. Ki ish ish. Here we have the ish ish again, emphasis, because every single man, Sher yikalel et aviva et imo, who curses his father or his mother, mot yumat, shall certainly be put to death. Aviv or imo kilel damav bo. He has cursed his mother or his father. His blood is upon him. And I'll explain the concept of that in a second. But let's just go through this. Okay, yikalel. What does it mean, yikalel? Okay, it's a horrible thing to say when you're a teenager. F you, mom or dad, right? You definitely deserve to get a big slap across the face for talking to your mother or your father that way. But that's not what yikalel means. Yikalel means to curse your mother or your father in the name of God. As, for instance, did the blasphemer, as we'll get to in the book of Numbers. Okay, if you, I won't even say it, right? Let's say you bless, right? I Yahweh, please bless my mother and my father. Something I pray pretty much every day, either by myself in my private prayer, or if I'm in communal prayer, then to myself as well. So Yahweh, in the name Yahweh, I please, or in the name of Yahweh, or as Hi Yahweh, as Yahweh lives, may he bless my mother and my father. Okay, that's something I could say with a full heart. Now imagine a child who replaces the word bless with the word curse and invokes the name of God. This time I will not use his name for obvious reasons. That is what we're talking about when we're talking about cursing one's mother or one's father. It means invoking the true name of God to announce a curse against one's mother or one's father. Because announcing a curse against one's mother or one's father using the name of a foreign god is disgusting, but it's not a real curse because that God doesn't exist. Or just saying, F you, mom, which maybe a lot of teenagers have or did in this day. They should get their teeth knocked out if they do, but hey, it happens. That is not what the Torah means by cursing one's mother or one's father. What the Torah means by cursing one's mother or one's father is invoking the name of God, the true name of God, to pronounce a curse against one's mother and one's father, because now it's a real curse because you're invoking the name. Okay, the name has true power. It doesn't mean that God, that Yahweh is going to carry out the curse, but the very fact that you are attempting to convince him, to convince Yahweh to carry out a curse against your own mother and your father is considered so disgusting, is considered so beyond the pale that such a person should be put to death. So just to clarify what that means. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Anybody? Before we move on, making good progress on this. We'll probably go for about another half an hour or so. All right, just give me 1 second. I'm not going to unplug or anything. And I just want to grab some water. Okay, be right back. BRB. Some nice cold sparkly water. My favorite. Okay, verse 10. So now we get into, as it says here, the punishments for sexual immorality. So we saw this in Leviticus 18. So a lot of what we saw here in 19 is really a throwback to, I'm sorry, up here is really a throwback to 19. It's kind of a continuation in 19. Molech is mentioned, if I'm not mistaken, in 19 rather than 18. I'm wrong about that. Maybe it was 18. I think 19. The Ovot and the Yedonim, the contacting the dead, is mentioned in 19. The cursing your mother and your father. Well, it mentions in 19 that you should honor your mother and your father. So that's a reference back to 19. So basically, this first half of the chapter is, not half, but this first portion of the chapter is referencing 19, Leviticus 19, verse 10. And now most of this is referencing Leviticus 18, because remember, Leviticus 18 dealt with the laws of sexual, I don't like to call it sexual immorality. So it's not really what it is. Of course, it's immoral. Any violation of the Torah is by definition immoral, but it's really sexual depravity. I think really points out what the Torah is getting at. All of the stuff that Torah prohibits are really it's like sick, sh, you know what, right? I mean, screwing your sister or your aunt is, you really got to be a sicko to do that, right? Or to, screw your dog or your cat. Got to be something seriously wrong with you to do that. Okay, I think any normal human being can relate to that. Although in the United States these days, I don't know anymore. Okay, verse 10. Ish asher yinaf et eshet ish asher yinaf et eshet re'ehu mot yumat hano'ef we ha'no'afet. So any person, or I shouldn't say any because it's not ish here, a person that commits adultery with eshet ish, with the woman of another man, with the wife of another man, asher yinaf et eshet re'ehu, who commits adultery with the wife of his fellow man, his fellow Israelite, very specifically here. That doesn't mean you can commit adultery with a non-Israelite, but the Torah is giving laws to Israel. Okay, mot yumat shall certainly be put to death. Hano'efet, both the man and the woman who participated in this adultery. So let me explain a little bit what's going on here, because the word adultery, and by the way, this is one of the 10 commandments, is lutin af, do not commit adultery. But adultery means something very specific in the Torah. It does not mean the same thing that we say when we mean when we say the word adultery in modern English. So adultery in the Torah is something very specific. It's when a man who is not married when a man sleeps with a woman who's married or engaged to another man. When a man sleeps with a married woman. It's not when a woman sleeps with a married man. If a woman is unmarried and she sleeps with a married man, that is not adultery in the Torah, because men are allowed to have multiple women. They can be wives, they can be concubines, they could be, even as we saw in the case of Yehuda and Tamar, they can even be random sexual encounters. Not saying that's a good thing, but it's not a violation of adultery. So adultery doesn't mean being married and sleeping outside your marriage. Adultery in the Torah very specifically means sleeping with a married woman if you are not her husband. A married woman is only allowed to sleep, and sleep again is a euphemism, even in the Torah. Shkav, to have vaginal intercourse. A woman is only allowed to have a married woman is only allowed to have vaginal intercourse with her husband, with nobody else. A man is allowed to have vaginal intercourse with his wife, or with any woman that does not belong, that is not the wife or engaged to another man. Okay, so ni'uf in the context of the Torah is a man sleeping with a married woman. Okay, with another man's wife. You violated the sanctity. You violated the that man's province. You've kind of violated his household. You've invaded his household. You've taken something that belongs to him, and I don't mean belongs in the sense of a whatever, an iPhone or something like that. Something that is part of his household, and you have invaded his household by doing so. And this is obviously a big no-no. It's one of the 10 commandments. And we see it here. Anyone who does such a thing is put to death, and the woman who participates is also put to death. Now, obviously, all of these cases go to the judges. If the woman is an unwilling participant, let's say she's raped, then no judge in their right mind, or no one in their right mind, is going to expect that the woman is to to be put to death. We're talking about willing participants here, and we will get to commandments in the Torah where we see very specifically that if the woman is a non-willing participant, for instance, if she's out in the country and she calls out, she is getting raped and she calls out, or she's getting raped basically, and she calls out, and nobody hears, then she is not held guilty. But if it's in the city and she doesn't call out, or maybe it says they call out, we'll get to it eventually, then she is held guilty because there are enough people around there that could have come and saved her. So it's an implication that she really kind of wanted to be raped. Okay, the point is these are meant to illustrate points. These are not. This again. I'll quote to the Yale professor, is he of divinity? I can't remember what he is exactly, of religion. Joel Baden, who is definitely, I wouldn't call him exactly secular, but he definitely holds by the documentary hypothesis. He does not believe the Torah to be divine. In fact, he is one of the people pushing, I think he calls it the new theory or the revised documentary hypothesis or something like that. But he says something very brilliant. He actually is a very brilliant Torah scholar, very brilliant. And he says that the Torah is, someone asked him, are the laws of the Torah meant to be illustrative or meant to be explicit, meaning meant to be actual laws? And he says the laws of the Torah are illustrative at best. In other words, they're getting certain points across that then can be used by the judges to adjudicate, to judge cases. So what this is saying here is, if the case is brought to the judges and the judges determine that both the husband or I should say both the man and the married woman, the woman who is married to another man, were willing participants, then both are put to death. But obviously the judges are going to be the ones to search out the details of each case, to search out the evidence of each case. And if it turns out the woman was not a willing participant in any way, shape, or form, okay, she was minding her own business, she was just grocery shopping, and she was dragged into an alley and raped, and she happened to be a married woman, then no judge in his right mind is going to say that woman deserves the death penalty. We're talking here about willing participants. Okay, let's see if there's any commentary here. Okay, 9, who vilifies. The verb kaleo, to treat with disrespect, to vilify, or to insult, literally to make light of, is the antonym of honor. Literally, make heavy your father or your mother in the Decalogue. Oh, that is actually a brilliant point, which I've never realized before, but he's 100% right. So okay, let me just read this again. Come in. Huh. Okay, neither here nor there. I won't get into. That's just a brilliant point that I never realized before. It's from myself. I'll deal with another time. But so I guess he's saying that maybe it doesn't have to be an actual curse in the name of God, but I'm not sure I agree with that, because what does it mean? It's to insult or vilify is kind of too vague a statement. But okay, I'll keep it in mind for the future. Okay, married woman. So here's our verse 10. So he translates verse 10 as, and a man who commits adultery with a married woman, who commits adultery with his fellow man's wife, the adulterer and the adulteress are doomed to die. I like the translation too, doomed to die. Yeah, I like it. He's good. Yeah, because, okay, again, that's just for my own edification. I don't want to go down the rabbit hole, and it's not relevant right now. Okay. Anywho, what does he comment on that? A married woman, the Hebrew says literally a man's woman or wife. The adulteress, Avraham ibn Ezra shrewdly observes of the Hebrew term hanoefet, which is an active verbal form, that she had been constrained by the man, that had she been constrained by the man to submit to the sexual act, she would not have been so designated. Very brilliant point as well. Again, a bit technical, so maybe we won't get into it, but maybe I will. So hano'ef and hano'efet, this the adulterer and the adulteress, because it does kind of make sense even in English. The very fact that she's being called an adulteress is what Avraham ibn Ezra says, and he was, can't necessarily call him Karaite leaning, but one of my favorite medieval commentators, an absolutely brilliant commentator. We've looked at some of his stuff before, and maybe we should even go back to looking at it again. But basically, what the Ibn Ezra is saying is that by calling her the adulteress, that very fact or that very word implies that she was actively taking part in the sexual act as a married woman, okay, with another man. Right? It doesn't just say that the adulterer and a woman. It says the adulterer and the adulteress, meaning she was a willing participant, or else she would not be called the adulteress. Very brilliant point by the Ibn Ezra. Okay, verse 11. Wa'ish asher yishkav et eshet aviv, erwat aviv gila moth yumthu shnehem dmehem bam. I didn't explain up here, but I'll explain it here. Okay, verse 11. A man who has sexual intercourse with his father's wife, and it doesn't necessarily mean his mother, so his father could have a second wife, or his father could have been divorced, or the mother could have died. His father's wife, Erwat Aviv Gila, he has revealed, uncovered the nakedness of his father. In other words, he's kind of gotten into his father's very private province. Okay, that's what that expression means. Mot yumthu, they shall be put to death. Shnehem demehem bam. They shall both be put. The two of them shall be put to death. And again, this implies here willing participant. This implies that a son having sexual relations with his stepmother, that both were willing participants, and therefore they're both put to death. Well, why does this even need to be mentioned? This is adultery. The stepmom is a married woman. She's married to the man's father, or to the boy's, I won't say boy, but the son's father. And so having sexual relations with her already constitutes adultery, but this is mentioned because, I think, for two reasons. A, because it's even more depraved, because it's his own father's wife. But I think more than that, maybe you would think that because it's his father's wife, it's kind of all in the family, so it doesn't really constitute adultery, right? You didn't sleep with another man's wife. It was his own father's wife. He's part of the family, so it's not like going outside of the family to sleep with a completely foreign woman. This is my own father's wife. This is my stepmom, so it's not really the same thing. And here the Torah is telling us that it most certainly is the same thing. And then we have at the end, mehem bam, their blood is upon them, or their blood is on them. And this is a concept that we see a bunch of times throughout the Torah. Whenever it says demehem alem or demehem bam, their blood is upon them. This means that they're responsible for what happens. The fact that they're put to death, okay, it's their own fault. They are responsible for their own blood being spilled. And the example I always like to give is a policeman. Let's pretend that all of the policemen, again, I use the United States as an example. Let's pretend that all of the policemen in the United States were just and honest and did everything 100% right. And someone walked up to a policeman and started waving a gun in the policeman's face, and the policeman shot this person and killed him. Then Demobo, his blood, the person who's killed, his blood is upon himself. He killed himself. Okay, death by cop, I guess they call it. He killed himself. It wasn't the policeman carried out the act, but the responsibility for the spilling of his blood is his own responsibility. He created a situation he caused a situation where the right cause of action was for this policeman to shoot him. So it's almost like he spilled his own blood, or his actions. He spilled his own. Is the cause, or he's responsible for his own blood being spilled by dint of his of his actions. And that's the idea that's being expressed here, that when these two people are put to death, they've spilled their own blood. They're responsible for their own deaths. The people who are actually killing them are just carrying out the act, but they're the ones who have caused their own blood to be spilled because they committed this action. They're the responsible party for their own deaths or for their blood being spilled. Okay? It's not the blood of an innocent person being spilled. It's the blood of someone who deserves it being spilled, and therefore they are the spillers of their own blood in a theoretical sense. Okay, that's verse 11. Any questions? Any comments? I think we'll go a little bit more. It's 7:30 here in Israel. Let's move on. Verse 12. Wa'ish asher yishkav et ka'laton mot yumatu shnehem tevel asu d'mehema. So any man who sleeps with his daughter-in-law. Okay, again, we saw both of these instances, both the stepmother and the daughter-in-law in 18, but there we were not given the punishments. We were just told that this is what you should not do. Okay, you reveal the nakedness by doing so. Here we're given the actual punishments. So if you sleep with your daughter-in-law, again, it's kind of a similar situation to the stepmom. So the daughter-in-law is a married woman. It's a person's son's wife. So it constitutes adultery because this woman is married to the person's son. Why does the Torah need to mention it? Maybe the father would think, hey, it's my son. My son belongs to me, so everything he has belongs to me. So what's the big deal if I sleep with his wife? So maybe it's not a big deal. And the Torah is saying, of course, it is a big deal. Doesn't even matter if it's your father's wife or if it's your son's wife. That doesn't give any kind of exemption. It's not just because it's all in the family doesn't make it any better. In fact, it's more depraved actually. And shneim mot yumatu shneim, both of them shall be put to death. Again, assuming the assumption here, the underlying assumption is that both were willing participants. Tevel asu, so tevel is usually translated as abomination. Let's see, they translate it here. Perversion. They've done a perversion. Demehem bam. Tevel is sometimes translated as an abomination, like to'eva. It's one of the words that is translated, expresses the idea of a disgusting thing or a thing that ought not be done. Okay, demehem bam, and their blood is upon them. They're responsible for the spilling of their own blood. No one else is responsible but them. Verse 13. V'ish asher yishkav et zachar mishkave isha to'eva asu shnehem mot yumatu demehem bam. Let me just see if Robert Alter has any more commentaries that we might have missed. So, yeah, in verse 11, the two of them are doomed to die. As with the preceding law, the assumption is that the woman is a willing participant. We mentioned that. Okay, so here we have in 13, the prohibition against homosexuality. Let me read it, and then I'll point out what I always try to point out. Verse 13, so a man who has sexual relations with another man, mishkave isha, as one would have sexual relations with a woman, they've done an abomination. Shneim, they've both done an abomination. Both shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. So there are a number of things to say here. The main thing to say is, and I've mentioned it before, is that this is specifically speaking about anal sex between two males, in my strong opinion. So the language here is anyone who has sexual relations with a man as one would have sexual relations with a woman. Now, and sexual relations with a woman is speaking specifically about vaginal sex. It's not talking about other types of sexual interaction. So the analogy within the gay or the homosexual world for going all the way is anal sex. Okay, and this is why it's my strong opinion that that's what the Torah is talking about here. And and the punishment is the death penalty. The man bomb, they are both responsible. Their blood is upon them, both responsible for their own death. What this means, in my opinion, I know this is a controversial opinion. Oh well, I don't care. Is that other types of sexual interaction or sexual horseplay between males, which, by the way, is very common in some societies and very common in probably in all societies, especially let's say during the teenage years, it's very common for that kind of thing to happen. There's not a death penalty. Okay, so if I don't need to get into the gory details, but if let's say two males engage in oral sex, I will get into the gory details. Okay, that may be disgusting, that may be gross, but it does not constitute the death penalty in the Torah, in my strong opinion. There's an article that I like to show, which I could bring up. I don't need to linger on it. If you're interested in a brief article that a brilliant Torah scholar who I've mentioned before, who died in the early, I think, year 2000 or thereabouts, named David Daub, writes about this. He brings out why he thinks this is the case, and I think his argument is quite convincing. Another interesting thing to say here is that in the act of anal sex between two males, you have the active participant and you have the passive participant, right? The one who throws and the one who catches, the one who gives and the one who receives, and both are put to death. Now, in certain societies, it's been pointed out that the real abomination is to be in the passive position. Okay, if you are a guy, you do not want to be, you don't want that to happen to you. You don't want to be, blooped up the boop, right? I think of the scene from the movie Pulp Fiction, which I rewatched recently. Pretty good movie, a little bit sick and depraved, but pretty good movie, kind of brilliant in its own way. And we have a scene where, who is it? Marcellus, the big black guy, like the head honcho, the head mafia guy or head whatever, gangster. He is dragged down into the basement of the store by, who is it? Zeke, I think the guy's name was, whatever, and is raped in the behind by this guy, Zeke or whatever, I can't remember. Whatever, by the store owner, right? And besides the fact that obviously he's raped there, so he wouldn't be put to death. The one who's being raped, Marcellus, wouldn't be put to death because he's not a willing participant. But that's not even the point. Even if he were, if he were a willing participant, then one could say that it's his disgrace that he's allowing such a thing to happen to him. So he's the only one that should be put to death. But the Torah says no, both the active and the passive participant should be put to death. Why? Because the active participant is causing the effemination, is causing the disgrace of this other man. So not only is the passive participant put to death, but the active participant is put to death because he is causing the other person to be effeminated. So the real disgrace here, or the real disgusting thing here, the real abomination here, is the penetration of a male in the butt by another male, is being, how can we say this delicately, being effed up the butt by another guy, right? You are not allowed to turn yourself into a woman. You're not allowed to be effed. Sorry for my French, but I just want to get the point across. You're not allowed as a male to be effed like a woman, okay? And if you allow yourself to be so, then you have committed something that is disgraceful. But by extension, the person who did that to you is caused you to be effeminated, and so that person is also put to death. But the real disgrace is the man who is in the passive position. He has allowed himself to be effeminated. He's allowed himself to be violated. He's allowed himself to be penetrated, and only a woman should allow herself to be penetrated. A man should be the penetrator, not the penetratee. So he has really done something disgusting, but the person who's done it has participated in making him do this disgusting thing. So both are put to death because they are both willing participants in making the passive person uh, uh, turn or commit or be uh, uh, have this hideous act performed on them. I hope that kind of makes sense. Okay. Someone disagree. All forms of deviance are off limits. Any other interpretation is not valid because you are not Levite priest. Okay, fair enough. I know it's a controversial. I know it's a controversial topic. So we'll just move on. A lot of people disagree, and whatever. We won't go into it. Okay. Verse 14. But if you want, Suri, I can forward you this article by David Daub, and I think he points it out pretty well. Okay, verse 14. Ish asher yikach et isha wa et ima zima hi. A man who takes a wife and her mother, or takes a woman and her mother. In other words, takes as wife a woman and her own mother. Zimahi. This is a depravity. This is a, how do they translate it here? Wickedness. They translate here. Okay. But yisrafu oto wathen wilot ez zima b'tochachem. He shall be burnt, or they shall burn him. And here again may imply that the people of the land, meaning that the people shall burn him in fire, him and them, and the mother-daughter pair, again assuming they're willing participants. And there shall not be evil. How do they translate zima again? Wickedness among you. See how Robert Alter translates this. The two men doomed to die. Man who lies with his father's wife. No, wait a second. Man who takes a woman and here he goes. So he translates zima as depravity, and that's the translation that I'm more familiar with. And a man who takes a woman and her mother, it is depravity. In fire he and they shall be burned, so that there be no depravity in your midst. Okay, let's go back and look at some of the comments. Verse 13, this is speaking about homosexuality. This locution, literally the lying with a woman, as in 1822, and see the comment there, plausibly leads the Talmud and Sanhedrin to characterize the act as putting a brush into a tube. That is the particular homosexual act of penetration. So there you go. So Robert Alter is basically saying the point that I'm saying, and that it's speaking specifically about anal penetration of one male by another. And I know this is kind of like a hot button topic, but I'm just here to tell you what I think the Torah says. If you don't like it, then go argue with God, because that's what I believe that the language of the Torah is bringing out. Okay, and Robert Alter saying that he's also pointing to the Talmud. Not that the rabbis are the be all and end all, but it is interesting that he is quoting the Talmud that is saying the same thing. That's specifically the act of anal penetration that is considered abhorrent. Okay. Verse 14, Robert Alter says takes. The use of this verb here and several times in subsequent verses is an ellipsis for takes as a wife, for sure, but its choice of the term may be dictated by the way it stresses the males taking the initiative. Okay. All right. I'm not so sure I agree with that, but it doesn't matter. Okay. So that's marrying a woman and her own mother. Verse 15. Wa ish asher yiten shchav to behema mot yumat wa et habehema ta'arrohu. So a man who yiten shchvato behema, who has sex with an animal, and again, well, we'll just leave it at that. Okay, but really, this is speaking about having vaginal sex with a female animal. Does it apply to having? We don't need to go down this route. Okay, does it apply to having anal sex with an animal? Very possibly, because that's like, I don't know, homosexuality and bestiality are all rolled into one. But really, what it's speaking about is, if we take it at its very basic level, it's speaking about a man having vaginal sex with an animal. In that case, he's put to death, and the animal is killed as well. What did the animal do wrong? Absolutely nothing. But the animal has now been defiled, and the life of an animal, as much as I love all the pets I've had in my life, the life of an animal is not the same as the life of a human being. So even though the animal is not a willing participant, because animals by their very nature cannot make such choices, they do not make moral choices. Maybe they can, express their unhappiness with the situation, but they don't make moral choices as to whether be a participant or not. Usually, what happens to animals just happens to them. But nonetheless, this animal has now been defiled. It's become, in a certain sense, unclean, defiled. It's a reminder of this horrible act that's happened, of this disgusting act that's happened, and so the animal is killed as well. Okay. All right. We see this in a number of cases where animals are put to death, even though, for various reasons, even though they didn't do anything wrong. We'll see this in other cases when we get to them. Okay, what verse 16, and maybe we'll stop after 16. I think we will. Well, isha asher tikrav el kol behema le oto והרגת את האישה ואת הבהמה מות יומתו דמיהם בם. So a woman who approaches any animal, to lie down before her. I just want to look at this word. Rava. My own edification. Yeah. Aramaic form of Ravatz, the Hebrew Rava. Right. So Ravatz, Larbitz, Ravatz is usually means to lie down. And without getting too technical, Ravas, Sadi, this final Sadi here is a guttural, and Rava with an ayin is also a guttural, so it's very possible that there could be an interchange between the Sadi and the ayin, that these two words mean essentially the same, and the BDV is pointing out that Rava is the Aramaic form of Ravat, so the BDB is saying it usually means to lie down, chiefly unnatural, yet compare also Sabin Rava. Okay, that doesn't matter. Kal, someone am I lying down for repose? Let me just see where else it occurs. Again, just kind of for my own edification. 1819. It's only really one other place. Oh, only in Leviticus 18. But then where is this being pointed to? Psalm 139:3. Let me just look at this for myself for a second. E. Interesting. Again, Samuel 18:23. Just looking at this for myself. Just give me 1 second, please. Ma'rutz. Yumer lo rutz viratz. Ahi ma'as. דרך הכיכר ויעבור את כושי. Let's see what that, I think that's a second. So 1823. Not sure what the connection is. I think maybe that's a. Okay. Okay. It's 1919. Tarbiyah. Okay. All right. Cool. Okay, that was just for my own edification. So the commandment here is Isha Shetikov, basically any woman who spreads her legs to a male animal. Then right, literally, Isha Shetikrav et kol behema riv'ata. So a woman who approaches any animal, riv'ata, to lie down before it. You guys, right? The Torah speaks in euphemisms. You all get the idea. But et Isha, you shall kill the woman. Et behema mot et behema, and the animal. Mot yumatu demehem bam. They shall both be put to death. Their blood is upon them. This is a very, when I look at it, I see some puzzling things here. So, number one, if we compare it to the man who has vaginal sex with an animal, then the language here is that the man, oops, I just pressed on something. Sorry about that. That the man is put to death, mot yumat, and the animal is laharog, is killed. Laharog doesn't imply murdered or put to death for crime. It just implies killed. There's no moral implication to laharog, really. So it's a difference kind of between murder and killed, or put to death for moral indiscretion, and killed. This just means killed. Okay, slaughter, not slaughtered, killed. But here the language is very different. It's very strange, actually. So here we have that if now a woman lies before the animal, so here the woman and the animal are killed. They're not put to death. Well, it says afterwards, but in the meantime, they're not put to death, they're killed. And here it says they're both put to death. Okay, so this is an expression of no moral responsibility. The word haragta, in my opinion. So the woman and the animal are killed. No moral judgment or no moral implication. There's no moral implication there. They're just killed. Okay, but here this verb or this phrase, mot yumatu, they shall both be put to death, or shall be put to death, and this is in the plural, so it means both of them. This implies being put to death for indiscretion. This kind of almost implies that the animal is somehow responsible. And then it says demehem bam, their blood is upon them. They are responsible for their own blood being spilled. This is a very strange wording, in my opinion, because how can the language here? So here it says, you shall kill the woman and the animal. That implies no moral responsibility, just the fact they're just killed without any moral judgment there. But this phrase, these two phrases here, mot yumatu, they shall certainly be put to death, and their blood is upon them. Both of these imply moral perversion. Okay, that they are put to death because they've done something morally wrong. And demehem bam, their blood is upon them, implies that they are responsible for their own death. How is the animal responsible for its own death? It's really, really strange language. I don't have an answer, honestly. It's very strange wording here, except to say that perhaps because the animal in this case is in the active position, the animal is the one performing the act, and because it's a woman, and women are in general maybe not as held to the same moral responsibility as men for various reasons. Maybe the Torah is figuratively saying that somehow the animal has some kind of responsibility. It doesn't make sense to me, because animals do not have any physical or do not have any moral responsibility. Animals don't know right from wrong. And so this animal has not done any morally incorrect act. But the wording is just very, very strange here. I'd be curious to see what various commentators say about it. I don't know if Robert Alter picks up on it at all. He doesn't. But in 15, he says, commentators have wrestled with the reason for executing the animal. As Rashi says, if the person committed a wrong, what wrong has the beast done? Fair enough question. This is the question we asked. This is speaking about the man penetrating a female animal. The most plausible explanation is that the beast, even without its volition, has been associated with a disgusting act and so must be destroyed as a contaminated thing. That's pretty much exactly what we said, right? The beast, the animal has become defiled, and it's a walking reminder of this disgusting act, and so it has to be taken out of this earth. Okay. And on that lovely note, I think we'll end. Okay. But I must point out that the language here is really, really strange. Maybe should we look at the Ibn Ezra just for the heck of it? We haven't checked out the Ibn Ezra for a long time. Shabbat shalom, Adrian. Let's check out the Ibn Ezra on this one, just for the heck of it, since he was mentioned before, and I've been ignoring him for too long. Okay, so Sfaria. So it's Leviticus 20:16. Where does this work again? I think we go to Tanach. Okay. Okay, Targum. Ibn Ezra. Here we go. Then we're going to go to Vayikra. We're going to go to chapter 20. And we're going to go to verse 16. Okay. No, here it's listed as, oh, that's 16. I'm sorry, that's 15. So now we go to 16. Shem Pa'al. שפת הדף מקורות פתיחה. שם הפועל ואם הוא בכירי כמו שרי לכם, כי משקלי שמות הפועלים משתנים. משקלי שמות הפועלים הם משתנים. So he's giving a very technical answer here. Shem Poal. So Riv'ah is Shem Poal. He's saying that this is the infinitive. I at least have the English translation for the Ibn Ezra. I don't know why they don't have it here. Riv'ah v'im hu bechirik. כמו בשברי לכם כמשקלי. שמות הפועלים הם משתנים. One second, כמו בשבילי, I don't know. Sure where this is pointing to. לכם הם משקלי. שמות הפועלים הם משתנים. אם הוא בחירי כמו בשבילי לכם כמשקלי שמות הפועלים הם משתנים. One second. כמו בשברי לכם כמשקלי. So what he's saying is, okay, if this is ve'im ubechirik, if there's a chirik, or the reason that there's a chirik here, the riva, because the weight of the names of the infinitives of the verbs are different. I'm not really sure what he's saying. I'd have to think about more what he's saying. Anyway, it's a very technical point, and he really doesn't answer our question. So we'll just move on. And I think we're going to end it here. So we got through about halfway through Leviticus chapter 20. Let me make a note for myself that we got up to verse 16. And we're starting on 17 next time. Just one second. Just making a note. Start on verse 17. Okay. And we will end the study here. Before we do, any questions, any comments? If not, then I guess we're going to end the study. I hope you enjoyed the study. Hope you got something out of it. And please pass the word around. Let people know that we're doing this study. You can always listen to the replay. You can also always listen to the replay on YouTube, on the link I sent out, or on the details I sent out. The YouTube link there's always a replay. If you can't find it, you can always go to either the World Alliance of Qara'im YouTube channel or the Karaite Insights YouTube channel. And in both places, if you go under the live tab, you will find a replay of the study. And that's it. Please get the word out. I've started doing a lot of short videos, like 60-second videos. These seem to get a lot more views than the studies. I guess people have a 60-second attention span and not a 3-hour attention span, but I guess that's to be expected. These are really detailed studies, but I love these studies. I just love them because they really allow us to take a deep dive into the text of the Torah. I learned so much from the studies. I learned something new every single time. And that's what it's all about, right? Learning, teaching, studying Torah together, and trying to live by the word of Yahweh. So with that being said, yeah, me too, Antoinette. I'm with you on that one. I really like deep dives. So with that all being said, then let me end the study or wrap the study up. And I wish everybody a Shabbat Shalom and a Shavua Tov, wherever you happen to be in the world. Hope you guys have a great week. Once again, if you missed it at the beginning, I made the official announcement that we are opening our first World Alliance of Qara'im community here in Katsarin, in the Golan Heights. So come and let's set up a real live in-person community. If your heart brings you to do so, then do so. And we will go out with some nice music. And yeah, that's about all I got this Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom, Shavua Tov, and see you guys again real soon.
בארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיני אל ההרים, מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל ייתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך, הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך, יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך לך, השם צילך על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ופועלך מעתה ועד עולם. אוי 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 שיר למעלות, תישא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם השם עושה שמיים וארץ, אני אתן למות רגליך על ינום שומרך. אוי 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 שיר למעלות, תישא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי, עזרי מעם.